Okay, so before we go any further, you can see the railway grade basically comes out right here, and so it comes out right in this area here, and then could have continued this way. So right here there would have been a junction, and for a number of years, right? So we haven't gotten to our usual history lesson, but can mention a couple of things. So there would have been a junction just right up here, right where that car you see kind of curving in there, and there would have been a spur running this way here. So we're going to kind of turn and go this way and kind of follow this spur. Now initially the spur ran to and I'll show you a few maps here, so you can kind of see where we are. So the map would have the spur would have run into this this pit right here, which is known as the Dona, well, maybe it's not the proper name, right, on timetables, just known as Ballast Pit. I call it the Dona Pit, right, because we're just very close to Dona Station here. So the spur initially would have run into here, and it first appears on timetables in 1915. And then eventually it shows up again in 1923. And the capacity of this spur is shown as having 47 car capacity, but it also shares the same sort of junction with a spur belonging to the Fort William Paper Company, which was very large, which was 109 cars. And I'm guessing there was a spur that ran into the pit, and then this paper company spur would have ran this way, maybe towards the river. I'm not quite sure how that all sort of went together. Now in terms of this pit was rather important, because basically, as far as we know, the pit was used, the aggregate from this pit, the stone and I guess particularly gravel, I don't know how much stone is in here, would have been used for a lot of the upgrades that would have been done on this line after it became part of Canadian government railways. So there were some extensive upgrades that were done. So you can see the very large size of the pit. You can see how much material likely would have been removed, right? So it is quite a ways down. That whole side of this ridge would have been taken out. And again, this is all sort of, again, I'm not a geologist, but I have a little bit of geology training. This would all been probably till, right? We have the Dog River here, so we have a major river, right? And so this would have been all sort of till deposits that would have been pushed up over years from the river, from glaciation in this particular area. So again, a very, very good source of aggregate, and again, lots of it being used for upgrades on the line. So in particular, there's a very famous photograph of this just to the west of the Flett Tunnel. There's a 1909 picture, and you basically see that there's a trestle on the west side of the tunnel, and that eventually all gets filled in. And so the source of the rock and the gravel, the aggregate from that, came from this pit. And so again, very, very important for this rail line. Okay, so let's get ourselves out of here. The pit, and obviously the pit, they may have continued to use it after the line was abandoned in 1925. I mean, the rails would have still been here, but again, we don't know how much longer after that it would have been in use. All right, so let's leave the Dona Pit behind here and work our way to the west. We can really feel that cool north wind now. Gotta bundle up. So let's I just looked at my phone, it says it's 0. I don't know what it feels, what the feel like temperature is. And then I'm gonna have to bring my bike in on the way home. My gears are slipping. I don't know what happened. I used it last weekend and it was fine, but something's wrong with it today, so I have to be in a higher gear, otherwise it slips. Okay, so I guess before we start our usual history lesson, let's talk a little bit about the sign here. So again, this is Ellis Road, and then Ellis Road curves to go to the north and then comes back down closer to Ellis, which is the next station on the line. And so this portion here is known as Forbes Road on the maps and stuff, but you can see the sign here, Grand Trunk Road. So let's work our way to the west here along the road, along the grade. So this line was constructed by the Grand Trunk Pacific Railway between 1905 and 1908. Sorry, before we get going here, I just want to check my GPS. 1042. We're gonna climb. We were coming, like I was literally coasting all the way as we were coming east, and now we're gonna climb. So 1042, I gotta remember that number. So again, this line was constructed by the Grand Trunk Pacific Railway between 1905 and 1908. It was an attempt by the Grand Trunk Company to build a second transcontinental railway. The Grand Trunk Company was one of the oldest railway companies in Canada, dating back to 1852. Now, the Grand Trunk Company wasn't particularly keen on building a whole transcontinental network because of the cost and, you know, projected profits and things like that. We're getting into a cutting here. Lots of little cuttings, and there's a rock cut up ahead. So what they did was, after a lot of back and forth for many years, they formed a partnership with the Canadian government, whereby Grand Trunk would construct the western portion of this transcontinental line, everything from Winnipeg to the west coast at Prince Rupert, under the name Grand Trunk Pacific. And then the Canadian government would build the eastern portion of the line from Winnipeg to New Brunswick under the name National Transcontinental Railway, or NTR. So again, construction began on this line in 1905. There was actually a sod turning ceremony in Fort William, which is now part of Thunder Bay, where the Prime Minister Wilfrid Laurier came and did the official sod turning. Just checking to see if there's any traffic or anything. And so construction was completed in 1908 with the line running from Fort William to Superior Junction, which is now close by to the city of Sioux Lookout. So eventually the whole Grand Trunk and NTR system was built. Now, unfortunately, the Grand Trunk Company there was an issue with them taking over control of the NTR system. And so what ended up happening was the Canadian government had to take control of them. So before we go any further here, just we're up on a very high embankment, super high. It's got to be about 25 feet down or more, maybe 30 feet down. I guess at one time there either had to be a trestle here or there had to be a large culvert, and this line is famous for its concrete culverts. I went and looked, and there's a segmented concrete culvert, but again, I don't know if it dates back to the railway time or if it was put in after. So the Grand Trunk did not want to take over operation of the NTR system, so the Canadian government had to. And so what they did was they folded it into an entity known as the Canadian Government Railways, with a bunch of other rail lines as well. And so it operated as the Canadian Government Railways. Now the name of this line changed. So initially this line used to be known as the Lake Superior Division, or the Lake Superior branch of the Canadian Government Railways. The Grand Trunk Pacific Railway. Here we can see the Matawan River. We're going to come close to it very shortly, and then what it's going to do is it's going to mesh with the Dog River to form the Kaministiquia River just up ahead. So initially known as the Grand Trunk Pacific Lake Superior Division, Lake Superior branch, and then it became the Canadian Government Railways Fort William and Wraith subdivisions. Now, it was interesting because this line was a bit of an anomaly because it was a Grand Trunk line, but it connected to the NTR system. And so when the Canadian Government Railways took over, what they did was they leased this line from the Grand Trunk. So that's why it became part of the CGR system. So 1915, the Fort William and Wraith subdivisions. And then in 1919, when the Canadian Government Railways were folded along with Canadian Northern into Canadian National Railways, the name of this line changed. It became the Canadian National Railways Fort William and Wraith subdivisions. And then later in 1919, it became the Canadian National Railways Lake Superior subdivision. And then it continued like that until 1923, when the name changed yet again into the Graham subdivision, which is what most people know. Now, around that time, the government, Canadian National Railways, pretty much the government because they were owned by the government, began a plan to rationalize the lines, because basically you had this line, and just across the river over there, you have another CN line, which is the Kaministiquia subdivision, which was the old Canadian Northern line. So they basically said there's no point in running two lines through the same area. So the plan was to build a new bridge, which we're eventually going to check out up ahead, not on this episode. Again, going through a cutting here. So build a new bridge and then abandon this section of line all the way from what became Dog River Junction into part of Fort William. So roughly about 28 miles or so of the line. And so in 1924, the name changed again. So the line was split into two, the Crest Subdivision, which this was part of, and then the Graham Subdivision, which started at Kaministiquia Junction, where the new bridge was being built. And then in 1925, the line was split once again into the Crest, Wraith, and Quorn subdivisions. And then in the latter part of mid-1925, this section was abandoned, right? So everything from what was called Midway, so the junction with the Kaministiquia subdivision, all the way up to Dog River Junction was abandoned. So this piece was no longer in service. And so the line now started at Kaministiquia Junction, crossed the river on that new bridge, and then headed up to the west. And so the line continued as the Wraith and Quorn subdivisions until 1931, when the name reverted back to the Graham subdivision. And the line continued in operation until 1994, when it was abandoned. Sorry, it's a long story. It's a long, convoluted story. Okay, so let's pause here momentarily, and then we're going to continue working our way to the west here.